Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our first podcast that we're now calling I in 5, meaning that we'll do it in 5 minutes, most likely with Jeff and all the information that we want to squeeze out of him. We'll go over that, but we can put it into different segments. Welcome, Jeff, to this first one you're inaugurating with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Van. It's an honor.
And for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Dr. Van Lansing. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of HelpMeSee. And I'm here with Dr. Jeff Pettey, a very good friend and an extraordinary surgeon and a fantastic lecturer and teacher. We've had the pleasure of working with him in different scenarios and in Barcelona with great memories with over a glass of wine as well. um, and Jeff is the deputy or the vice chair of education for the Department of Ophthalmology of the Moran Eye Center in Utah, which needs no introductions due to the quality that we all know. So let us get started, Jeff. Really, your center is probably one of the few, if not about the only one, that really actively teaches manual small incision cataract surgery, M6, for those in the audience that are not familiar. What prompted Moran to do this, and how do you see it forward in with a residency training center and others that go to train? I know that you train other doctors also on this. So off to you, Jeff.
Yeah, cataract surgery has had such an interesting evolution from doing manual delivery of lenses with large incision extra caps to adoption of phaco. And in countries where phaco is primarily adopted, we've continued on that path with phaco. In fact, when I trained in my residency, 2007 to 2011, didn't see an actual manual delivery of a lens the entire time, whereas the rest of the world continued with extra cap and this surgery as it would. It evolved into this really beautifully elegant sutureless extracapsular cataract surgery. And it's not only done now in those countries where phaco didn't take off. Phaco is of course now becoming prevalent throughout the entire world. And now, actually, in countries where, again, we've primarily trained in phaco, there's a real burgeoning interest and this kind of organic interest in learning this sutureless extracapsular cataract surgery for a number of reasons, not the least of which, and this is really the most important one, the more surgical skills a surgeon has, a resident has, the better surgeon they will be in the end, and ability to perhaps use a different technique when it can be better for that patient can only come when you have exposures to those techniques.
Fantastic, Jeff. This brings me to that point, which I think that you just stressed, because I had thought of why should people who are already in practice learn this, particularly in settings like the US or Canada and Europe. I think you just answered it, but I think it would be great. Like, for instance, in which type of situations would you think that it would be valid or useful in the US? Not just to say, okay, I'm going to go on a mission trip to Honduras and I'm going to do surgery there because that's prevalent, but even within the US, what would be those kind of situations?
Yeah, the primary one that you'll hear people talk about is an ability to convert from phaco to SICS. Something's going wrong. We need to get this lens out and do it in a way that is, hopefully more safe. And that while that is the early perhaps interest by some surgeons, what we've really found over time is the ability to have this skill at a high enough level where you can primarily do this surgery. As I sit down and look, I'm going to say this lens could be done phaco, could be done small incision, but what is the most safe? What's going to be the best outcome for this patient? And again, it only comes with I'll say mastery of a second technique that you really have an ability to go back and forth between them. I've started a surgery doing SICS and actually converted to a phaco and vice versa, depending on what I'm seeing and what's happening with the patient.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And knowing that you also have external trainees, I know that some people that go out and do surgery, what is the typical profile of the external person that is not trained at Moran, but that goes to you for X number of days or weeks, and that they obviously have a keen interest, otherwise they would not be investing and leaving their practice for whatever number of days. No?
Yeah, really, strictly speaking about learning sutureless extra cap, there is a path. So for a phacosurgeon, first of all, the one thing that you may not be exposed to a lot is the scleral tunnel and the scleral groove, right? We just don't do as much work with clear corneal incisions, and that's the first thing. And that could be done in kind of wet lab settings. You can actually gain a lot of mastery on your own in terms of the tunnel, which if there is a step that is the key step, I would say that's the one. As soon as that's done well, a surgeon, an ophthalmic surgeon can fairly I'll say perhaps creatively do a delivery of a manual lens as long as that wound is constructed well. And so for people that are coming to us with interest, it's going to start with you need to become a student, it's watching videos, it's getting a book, it's doing wet lab time on your own. And at some point you do need to sit down with someone who is a master who can help you do this in a way that's safe for patients so patients can have equivalent good outcomes with you as you're going through your learning curve and process. And that's really where something like a virtual reality simulator, the HelpMeSee simulator, can come into play and really shorten that learning curve for individuals in a way that they can continue to have good outcomes for patients along the way and not have to take, we'll say, weeks and weeks and months, or perhaps even years over years to learn the surgical technique.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And now that you've mentioned it, I think it's good that we can jump in and I'll skip a little bit of the order and then I'll go back into it because I think this really flows nicely into. I mean, we had the pleasure of working with you in the publication of the first publication that HelpMeSee developed, which we call the TCC Pace, which was evaluating, for those who have not had the chance to read it, the results of simulation based training in very novice surgeons, those that either had very little experience, less than 5 surgeries, or none at all in 5 centers in India. What can you tell us about that, and how do you think that is useful for learning and moving on forward with other projects and research projects, Jeff?
Yeah, this is a really brilliant study, very thoughtful design. Again, taking a group of novice surgeons, and these are again, these trainees are at training sites with existing programs to help them get up to speed in sutureless extracap, and the control group versus the experimental groups simply was. In addition to what you already do, your normal kind of training curriculum, now a group of you are going to go through the small incision virtual reality training simulation, and then simply looked at outcomes and complications, and it cut it in half. I mean, from serious significant complications to more minor complications, it cut all of them in half. And that is a really, really significant number when you think about the learning curve for surgeons going through and how a single serious complication can potentially cause a bad outcome for a patient, and then also can significantly lengthen the amount of time that a trainee has to complete a surgery, pull an attending surgeon over to help complete the surgery, etc. Again, the idea that you can really, really dramatically shorten this learning curve for individuals, and not just shorten the curve, but make it safer along the way. None of us ever want complications for patients, and this is a clear indication that this is a way to decrease complications in that learning curve.
Fantastic, Jeff. Thank you. And thank you very much for helping us put that paper out there. It took a while, but I think the evidence speaks for itself. And we hope that it's only the first step in many that we can collaborate now that the Moran Eye Center has a simulator. How do you plan of using that simulator now with your own residents and other external people? No?
Yeah, we're very excited. Our trainees, again, you don't have, at least, coming through our center and coming through our affiliate centers, hundreds of white, brown, dark lenses coming through. We as we look and evaluate, what patients would be appropriate for a small incision case versus a phaco case, we really, again, try to find those optimal candidates. And so, our residents, we actively teach this. We train them in it, and there's just a limit to the number of cases they will be able to do. And so now through this, they'll be able to do the equivalent. Again, this is kind of my just gestalt, perhaps the equivalent of, 50 cases through virtual simulation by the time that they're doing these cases. So instead of having me take over, them do a part, me take over, them do a part, they're going to be able to do far more of the surgery in these early cases, again, in a safer way.
That's great, and I think our audience will have to remember that it's a simulator just simulates. No, it's the instructor led the concept that really instructs and learns together with the student. Because sometimes with other simulators, I know that people just park it out there and it's go and do 20 minutes or half an hour. That doesn't really help. I mean, it's probably better than nothing, but not the way that simulation based training should be instituted, I believe. No. Um, Putting that into context where you were saying that, will you still be thinking of sending your residents whenever possible, COVID-19 allowing, to India? I know that you have a very tight relationship, particularly with Aravind as well as we do. How do you see that also helping your own residents and maybe others, that relationship, or centers that they are excellent and do large volumes?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about surgery, and for US based residents, this is one area that I'm very passionate that, as we go from our institutions and we rotate wherever it is in the world on these international rotations, number one, we're guests. We're there as learners. Number two, the opportunity is to really learn and see how ophthalmology is practiced at a very high level in areas where perhaps there are less resources. And sometimes we actually get a little bit too focused on the surgical component, and to our detriment, right? If the only thing we're really focused on is going over and learning a surgical technique, you've lost one of the true, like, beautiful opportunities you would have had in your life to go learn, understand a culture, understand how care is delivered, again, at this high level. And so when our residents do go, that really is the primary, the primary goal, and then the primary objective is to learn, learn, learn. And along the way, now you're going to start seeing some surgeons who again are extraordinary at this procedure. You might be fortunate enough to be able to sit down and have some of them teach you along the way. And so whether it's, our partners in India, Nepal, Tanzania, or otherwise, we want them to learn the surgery. Well, we also want that to be balanced with the understanding that this is a really unique opportunity.
And so hopefully we'll get some of your residents to come down to Mexico here, since we've collaborated a lot. And Dr. Pamela Gonzalez, who was our main instructor, she works with you a lot, a fantastic surgeon and instructor. No, so I'm glad that we keep on working with that. And that brings me to one of the last questions. But I mean, you've been conducting this wet labs and M6 courses at the AEO. How have they been received? What kind of public do you have? Why is people interested? Are people interested in going to the AEO and all of a sudden going to an M6 course? I've seen some people that put a query mark in the face, like, "Why on earth would you be doing? Don't you want to go and see the latest phaco, the latest laser, or something like that?"
Yeah, it's a great question. The thing that was really surprising to me early on is it's every single kind of, I'll call it maybe generation or kind of age strata within ophthalmology. People toward the end of their careers that they perhaps even trained in extra cap originally, perhaps even intracap, and again wanting to potentially have this skill available to them, middle career, certainly early career. A lot of young ophthalmologists who again aren't getting this exposure. Again, primarily this comes from the goals of, I would like to do work in low resource settings, and if we don't have phaco, I'd like to be a competent surgeon. It can also be from the perspective of, I would like to be a better overall, well-rounded surgeon and have this skill in my back pocket as I'm operating. Whatever it is very consistent, and the level of interest and the level of participation actually has continued to grow with more SICS courses appearing at these national meetings.
Fantastic. And I mean, I think finally, so we can let you go because I know that you're extraordinarily busy. And I thank you for giving us this time, Jeff. I know it's not always easy to fit in your agenda, but what other types of studies? Because obviously, we need to generate that evidence out there that people understand that M6 is in many ways equal to, or in some cases, superior to phaco in the right patient, but also simulation based training. What type of studies, just top of your head, that you would think that we should be conducting, and obviously that hopefully you will be part of?
Yeah, so, thinking, if I could design something, again, we're not going to talk about how possible it is, but just design anything. It would be, head-to-head outcomes um, for the surgeon's actual skill set. So one of the early, beautiful studies was David Chang and Sandak Ruit in Nepal, and this was manual small incision, and David Chang was doing phaco, and the results were really interesting. The early visual acuities tended to favor the small incision cataract surgery. Of course, the corneas were clearer early in that time frame. And then as time went on, the visual outcomes tended to kind of become equivalent. Complications were roughly equivalent. There have been a number of these studies done, but if you could potentially do something prospective, large scale across multiple countries, and then across multiple skill sets, meaning someone who's an expert in one, expert in the other, someone who perhaps is an expert phacosurgeon, and then maybe more of an early advanced learner in small incision cataract surgery. That would really be the one way that you could show that absolutely there are patients that it is better for and more appropriate to have one versus the other, depending again on that where that skill level is for the individual surgeon. As far as simulation goes, we do need additional studies showing the overall shortening of the learning curve. We need that done at multiple sites throughout the world, and then also looking at visual outcomes, not just complication rates, but the ultimate visual outcomes for these individuals at 6 months, 12 months. And that will just take time, it will take coordination, but those are the kind of studies that can really push this to the forefront where it will really need to be in order to train the number of surgeons we need to across the world.
Well, that's it. Thank you very much, Jeff. I really appreciate it once again. Thank you for taking this time to speak to us. It was, as usual, as it has been a pleasure, and I look forward to meeting hopefully at the AEO, if not earlier, and we can go and celebrate.
Yeah, amen. You are far too gracious and kind. Thank you for your mentorship and friendship.
My pleasure. And cut. There we go.